Gathering the Nations with Jessica Arianes.
We're going to go through our reading portions, Genesis 31 through 33, and I encourage you all to participate. Again, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just about sharing what you think Yah is putting on your heart. I may have a portion or a perspective. It doesn't mean that your perspective is wrong or needs correction. So I would love to hear from you. And this is how we sharpen our iron. We sharpen our sword by engaging in conversation. Okay, so I encourage you to speak up, to share. And whoever would like to read, you can go ahead and read however much you want and then share on that. And then we'll go from there. So who would like to begin? And again, you can just read as much as you want or as little as you want.
I'll read. I
Thank
just
you,
need to
Michelle.
open my.
Sure.
So it says Jacob flees Laban. And he heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not towards him as before. And Adonai said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers, and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock. And he said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not towards me as before, but but the El of my father has been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but Yahweh suffered him not to hurt me. And if he said, thus the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said, thus the ring stract shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring stract. Thus Yahweh hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-stragged, speckled, and bristled. And the angel of Yahweh spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-stragged, and speckled, and bristled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. And I am Yahweh of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion of inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which Yahweh hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever Yahweh hath said unto thee, do. Then Jacob rose up, and set his sons and his wives upon camels. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padanaram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. And Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he had fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face towards the mountain of Gilead. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him, and pursued after him 7 days' journey. And they overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. And Yahweh came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and spake unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob, either good or bad. And Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountain of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore did thou flee secretly and steal away from me, and did not tell me, that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with song, and with tabrets, and with harp?
All right, very good. So is there anything that you would like to discuss from those chapters and verses? I mean, from that chapter and those verses, if anybody has anything that they would like to point out.
I think you covered it really well in your video last week. Was it last week or the week before that? With like him consulting Rachel and Leah, we see that there's authority in the woman too. And it's not just the man kind of giving orders, but he values their opinion. Kind of don't see that nowadays. Well, when people read the word, they kind of
Agreed.
like women are lesser, but we see that Jacob didn't see it that way. There was something that you had brought up in your YouTube video. I forget what it was.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit first and foremost about usury. I want you guys to take note because, again, we're going to discuss these things. It's very important because, you know, in order for us to truly understand the words of YHUH, you know, a lot of people make stuff up because they don't understand. So they make things up and they're not doing it. I don't think they're doing it to be facetious or evil. But again, they have to fill the void, right? So if they don't understand something, well, then they sort of lean on their own understanding and then they you know, go from there. But it's really simple to understand the words of YHUH when we understand that he was speaking actually again from a position of nobility. And he understood these things. And remember what a noble means. Remember, look here on my notes, a noble is someone who has inherited the right, the privileges, or the power, which is also authority that is ascribed to a qualified person, especially a free agent who held status over the lower classes of people. Now, these are not my definitions, they're actually biblical definitions. A privilege often misused by exacting usury. So when I went and did research on this term, usury, which is masha, I want you to write that down. I found that oftentimes when this power or this right was misused, it was misused by leaders or individuals who put upon another usury. We're going to talk about that because it's important. It's part of the relief. Remember that we remember all of a sudden, the usury is like taxation, it's taxes. And if this wasn't important, then they wouldn't have brought it to YHUH's attention when they asked him about the taxes of Caesar, right? So write down usury, write down here that 4855, and then we're going to look at another term in that regard. We're going to look at tribute, the word tribute, okay? Let me find it. Oh, here we go. And I'll bring that up in just a second, okay? So one of the crimes that Laban committed was this one here, 4855. Let's look at this word a little further. So here's an example. Notice that the word noble is used here and rulers. It says, then I consulted, and this is Nehemiah. Well, actually, all three verses are in Nehemiah or Nehemiah. Then I consulted with myself, and I rebuked the nobles and the rulers and said unto them, you exact usury, every one of his brother, and I set a great assembly against them. Again, we see it here in 5:10. I likewise and my brethren and my servants might exact of them money and corn. I pray you, let us leave off this tax or this usury. And if people of the land bring ware or any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exaction of every debt. Okay, so let's look at this. So you notice here, ladies and gentlemen, it says loan or debt. But look at the term here, it's deception. It says noon is a picture of a seed. A machine is a picture of the teeth, which means also to consume. I want you to notice something. So I'm going to break this down for you guys. So right away, if your teeth are part of the digestive process, digestion actually begins in the mouth. Not only does your mouth secrete certain enzymes that help break down the sugars and the proteins, but your teeth also help to prepare for your stomach's digestive system. So digestion begins right here in the mouth. The teeth in scripture are symbolic of consuming, to consume something. The letter sheen, the emblem of the letter sheen is fire. It's actually where we get the word ish. So if we were to look at ish, I want you to see something. This is pretty cool, okay? Oh, you know what? Actually, let's just look at really quick the word for man in Hebrew, which is going to be Adam, but we're looking. So here you can see. So it's Aleph, Yud, Sheen. You see that letter Sheen right there, right? That's the letter Sheen. And that's the letter Sheen. So the word for man is Ish. And then the word for fire is Ish. Aish, Aish. Okay. And word for woman is Aisha or Isha. So we see that fire is in the man. That fire, that vehement force, fire, flame, which can also be heat or wrath. Okay. So going back to the letter sheen now, and digestion and to consume. So when part of digestion, when you are digesting, what you're doing by consuming it is you're breaking it down. It's very similar to what a fire is capable of doing, destroying something, consuming it. A fire is an all-consuming fire, can consume something and break it down. So the idea is that when you break something down, you're burning it up for fuel. You're turning it into fuel or energy. You're burning it up. That's digestion. That's consumption. That's to consume. So the letter sheen is actually symbolized by the teeth as well as fire. Okay, the fire letter, sheen. All right, so now we got that letter here. And the next one that we have is noon. And noon is the seed, the seed. So right away, if I said to you, or the life force, but specifically the male seed, okay? If I said to you that this word in its descriptive functioning form is debt, or some sort of deceptive debt, and I'm telling you that the letters are to consume and then a seed, what do you think this word for debt, what does it look like it's going to do? Tell me what you think. What's going on here? What do you get a visual of? Somebody tell me. Yes, Amanda, go for it.
My first thoughts was consuming the inheritance.
To consume the seed, to consume the next generation. It is something that will take from the next generation and the next generation. It's something that it can consume an inheritance. It can consume, leave impoverished. So that's what debt can do. So let's now look at it from that perspective. So it says here, a continual pressing. Combined, these mean a continual pressing as an imposition such as debt or deception, which causes oppression. Also, gnashing of the teeth. Wow. So this word is nasha. It's also where we get the root of this. Another word that's similar to this is nasa, for deception. Interesting, right? Well, and as we learn these terms, when we get into the actual portion of the law and we learn about usury and creditors and lending and borrowing, okay? So Yah wants us to learn how to work with one another, but not to oppress one another, because love prevents us from oppressing one another. But you know, it really sat with me yesterday, today, it really sat with me. And again, as I was going through my study, I kept hearing the word to oppress your neighbor. And then again, you're not concerned about the welfare of the other person, but more so about your own, core V, your own beautification, right? I felt so convicted. Well, that's what this concept is. It's nasha. It's recognizing that person's contribution to you is such a blessing that you kind of overstep or cannot see the need to take care of it. and therefore be neglectful. And in some people's situations, there is a taking advantage of those who are weaker. This is important, okay, y'all? Because we're going to look at this as we continue to study on. But this is what Laban had done to Jacob. Laban had taken advantage of his circumstances and the fact that he had to flee, had nowhere else to go. And while he was under his hegemony or his care, he should have been treated fairly. But Laban, because Laban made this declaration, he said, I've seen that I am blessed because of you. And there then goes that heart of covetousness, right? Brother, okay, I cannot pronounce your name, but Brother Okay had messaged me regarding some material that he was considering, transacting. And, I said, again, as long as your heart is not doing it so that you're pursuing, wealth, and you don't have a covetous heart, then it's the covetousness that is a sin, not the prospering from it. And so it's the same thing here. It's not so much that Yah didn't want Laban to prosper. So there should have been this situation where he goes into that environment and he causes his environment to prosper because of the favor that's resting upon him. I want you all to hear this. As I was meditating, Yah kept bringing up many of you in my mind. And the message here really is that we should go into an institution or even in our employment, and we should be a blessing to the secular world around us. We should bring prosperity to them. There should be something about us in their presence that makes them say, you know what, that person stands out in excellence, or that person stands out in integrity. We should conduct ourselves in such a way that, again, we do stand out. It's not that we are standing above someone else, but we are standing out because of our conduct, because of the way that we hold ourselves or conduct ourselves, and the way that we, labor for others. But you'll notice something, that in that world, and quite often why we need boundaries, is because what will happen is somebody, Michelle has a great example. So they'll see your excellence, and guess what they want to do? Exploit it. Praise Yah for, labor laws, right? Michelle said that she was working, and she worked several jobs, and at one of the ladies that has been there for a very long time, she's able to do something at a rapid rate. Nobody's ever beat her record, right? And Michelle was like, I'm gonna beat her, but she was just having fun with herself, right? She was like, I'm just gonna see if I can beat her record. Well, Michelle not only beat her record by 1, but by 2. So twice as many. Was that true, Michelle? Twice as many?
Yeah.
So she 3 times. Yeah. She beat this lady's record so fast, faster than the machines. And then the leadership took note of that. Instead of, saying, hey, great job. Wow. They were like, do it again. And what they ended up telling Michelle was, oh, we see that you can work at that degree, that level. Keep it up. Do it again. So now their expectations of her were that she produce or perform at this rate. So again, that's part of that taking advantage. And that has to do with, again, the posture of one's heart, that covetousness. So you can see something here with usury, okay? So Jacob was actually using or applying the contract that he had originally made with Jacob was one of brotherly affection. He says, you're my brother, you're my ach, you're my brother. Should you work for nothing? Ask for me. So the contract was very clear that he would give himself over in labor as a force, and that he would be blessed in doing so. So not only was he going to work for his daughter, but Yahuwah also blessed Laban. He blessed him, and he succeeded. He excelled. Okay. But he was greedy. So later on, Jacob makes a claim in the courts of heaven through prayer. He makes a claim that Laban changed the contract, y'all, 10 times. So this word here for usury, and again, we need to understand this if we're going to understand the mastership or the financial economics of Israel as Israel was being released from Egypt and then being brought in from slave to master, being brought into their own continuity, their own independence, and then having to now work together amongst themselves, right? So it says here to lend on interest or usury. Now, what's important here is to note that under the Torah, usury was illegal. You could lend, but you could not charge tax. Also, the pagan nations, they did in fact lend with interest. I'm sorry, not tax, interest, okay? We're going to talk about tax in a second. So they could not lend without interest. Foreign nations, they actually did lend with great interest, and it made it very difficult for people to come up under that burden, so that that interest would, however they allowed it to develop, but that interest was really what was looming over them and made it difficult for them to find relief. So the Torah actually includes relief for any type of debt that's acquired. Another thing that is important to note is the regard for foreigners and strangers and individuals who were not natural citizens. There was a huge, the Father's heart really is, again, to protect those who are more vulnerable, who don't necessarily have a proper covering. Now, if a stranger, a man, comes into the land, uh, obviously he does not have tribal allegiance. He doesn't belong to any a tribe. So he is without a support system. He's without mishpoka, right? So that then you see right there that that tribal allegiance or that mishpoka sort of acts as a type of covering for one another. But so if a stranger comes through or a foreigner passes through, he doesn't have the same type of affinity, the same loyalty from others, because again, nobody knows him. So that's what makes that man vulnerable, which again, you're supposed to treat him as though he is a kin or he is a brother. Yah makes it so. So he protects that type of vulnerability. Also for the widows or the orphans. We don't hear much about the provision of a divorcee or a woman that's divorced because, believe it or not, divorce was not very common, even though it is today, and we tend to look to the Torah for legal rights of the divorcee. It was not very common. It was something that was like usury. Remember, the man has this nobility as the man. He has an inherited right, certain privileges and power, certain authority that's ascribed to him because he's qualified. He's the firstborn, the first of creation. The man was created first. So he has this status over the woman. And when it was used properly, he would raise the woman's status so that she also became noble. They became equally yoked. If a man truly loves his wife, he educates her, whatever the status, if she's impoverished in any way, the idea is that the love that he has for her brings her out of that poverty and brings her into his status. Right, brings her into a place of wealth and dominion. He doesn't exploit her weakness. He doesn't exploit her poverty. He doesn't exploit, her underbelly. Right, that's what a wicked man would do. So you see the same thing. Those who were wicked men, and this is what YHUH was talking about. Well, they did exactly that. It says that they failed to exhibit chesed, mercy, or compassion for the woman because of some flaw or some error that she may have had. And then she was either exploited as a wife and he would marry multiple wives, or she was sent out, left to live a particular life of destitution. Because back then, procreation was carried a huge weight, having a son, having children to then again occupy your dominion or occupy your territory. So going back to the heart of the matter here, this usury is this word masha 4855, and it comes from this root word here nasha, to exact usury. There we go. So I'm sorry, I had the wrong word. I had exact here. I think I had 53. But it's basically the same. We're going to look at both. So let's look at usury first, okay? So usury, as you can see, it's the same word. Can you all see that? But two different words, but it's the same. So you see noon sheen for to exact, and then usury is also noon sheen. So let's look at this. So it's this word here, masha, and then to exact is the word nasha. So again, it's root word. So masha means here, let's go. It says here, lending on interest. Okay, lending on interest. Now, later on, this would also be to employ taxation or to tax someone. But I want you to see something. It indicates an excessive profit, often in high interest charges. It has the meaning of debt. And again, it was applied to a loan, which was illegal. One more thing to note, and again, I'll go over these things on Tuesday, but foreign nations, so they would allow people to put up their land or their property, even their children, their wives, anything that had some sort of value, to put it up for collateral for a debt. Yes, the Torah forbids that. You could not use land as collateral for a debt. So this is why even Naboth later on forbids the solicitation of it or the sale of it. He says, "Yah forbid," right? So the land, and what it did is it ensured that nobody would forsake or lose their inheritance, and or that there would not be this conquest between one another, internal fighting or internal war. So again, perfect in his law is perfect. And so says here, it's the word nasha, and it's to lend or by reciprocity to borrow on security or interest. The only security that the Torah allows for is that a person put their own labor force up for collateral. So in other words, in the contract, it is, I will work for you. That's the only type of collateral that Yah allows. And that makes sense because then the reward that you receive is one of an honorable one. You worked for that. You earned that, right? So no one can take that away from you. You maintain your honor. So you can see here, it comes from the Hebrew word nasa, which again means here, it means to let a person have a loan or to use the owner's money for a time. And we'll talk more when we get into Deuteronomy and Exodus. We'll talk more and more in detail about this because, again, it really does have a lot to do with our own freedom and our own liberty and our souls being redeemed from the tribute of sin or from our that corvée or that burden that was placed on us to perform and to produce in error. And so what is it that Yahusha actually, because if you think about it, these are terms that Yahusha uses to convey and to give to us a revelation of the liberty that he's affording us by paying off our debts, right? So back to usury, masha, charging interest on a debt that leads to an insurmountable burden for excessive profit. Now, again, that meaning that you cannot come up out from it. It's too much. Now, let me give you an example, spiritually speaking, how this looks in the New Testament, right? In Matthew 23:4, it says that the scribes and the Pharisees, for they bind heavy burdens, too grievous to be borne, and they lay on men's shoulders, but they will not move them with one of their fingers. Now, again, that makes a lot of sense to me when Yahusha is talking about the adding to and the taking away of the law, the simplicity of the law. And the law was always put in place because of sin, but to relieve man from the burden of sin. Never to add to man's weakness, to exploit man's weakness, but to cover that weakness. Love covers. So it was even though the law was given because of sin, it was given because of sin, because it created a deficit, a weakness in the man. So the law was given as a covering to cover so that the man would know what is right to do and be able to do it, and thereby covering his weakness. It's a beautiful transaction. But nonetheless, we see that these wicked rulers in the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the council, what they do is they exploit the sin of mankind because they want to maintain their jobs. It was job security that really compelled them to continue to add to the law as though it was excessive. So guess what? They made it seem, even to this day, as though the law is burdensome, that the law is burdensome. The law is not burdensome. It says right here. So again, he's speaking to the scribes, who were the ones who would write, and then the Pharisees. And he says, for they bind heavy burdens, and they become cumbersome, or they become a grief. And this is why when I said to my sister, hey, I don't want this to be a heavy burden that I've placed upon you. It should be a joy for you to want to help me. And she says, yes, well, it was somewhat of a burden because you provided no relief for me. This was a beautiful way to really understand. I just loved the way that she had courage to really tell me, like, Jessica, I just need a break. Just give me a break when I'm working for you. Just give me a break when I'm working with you. And I said, I'm sorry, you're right. Okay. I'll make sure you eat and you're taken care of. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I was wrong. And so it says here, this Greek word is kai. Why? Hold on. Here, wrong word. So the word is fortion, and look at what it means here: a task or service that is to keep a record, a freight or an invoice. Okay, so in other words, to keep record of your burden, right? You owe me still this much. And it's interesting because the word says that love keeps no record, and we talked about this before, where a lot of the artifacts that were found through excavation, archaeological excavation, a lot of the artifacts that were found in foreign nations were actually records, invoices, and tallies of debt that was owed to the city or to the king. And so they made sure that they kept record of who owed what, okay? Because again, the love of money is the root of all evil. And so one of the words here that is synonymous with this is this word borrows. And that's probably where we get the word to borrow something. But it means here, again, it's synonymous with borrows or weight. It says here, the burden or lading of a ship or merchandise brought by sea. Okay, that is the burden. So remember when I did that video of the Phoenicians and their seafaring merchandise, and how in the book of Revelations, it talks about these various relics of merchandise. And oftentimes when Yahweh is dealing with the enemy, Satan and his minions, but in the symbolic form of a city like Tyre, for example, the charge against Satan, or the charge against the agents of darkness, or those who have fallen from grace, because of thine trafficking, because of thine merchandising. And then later we're told that it's because of the love of money, that covetousness, the love of money. Okay, so it's the root of all evil. So it says right here, to place a load through the abundance or authority. And remember, that's what a noble had. Ultimately, even though there were certain privileges and rights, it was an authority that was given to that noble or to that individual. So it says here, heaviness, weight, and trouble. So it became right here, watch this, write it down, borrows, burdensome, weight in reference to it's to put pressure on someone, okay, to perform. So when the burden of the day means the heavy labor of the day, mentioned in Revelations 2:24. And it says here, to designate precepts, look at that, which are burdensome to observe, to indicate sinful conduct and its consequences resulting in trouble and sorrow. Okay. And so we know that the Torah, or the ways of Yahuwah, are not burdensome. They do not weigh us down to the point where we cannot come up under it. That would be cruel for Yahweh to put a task upon us that was insurmountable, or something that could not be accomplished, that would just be cruel. It would be like telling your 2 or 3-year-old child to clean the entire house with the same expectations that you would have of an 18-year-old. That would just be cruel. Okay, just you're a child, and that's what I expect of my children all across the board with no consideration. That would just be cruel. Now in Proverbs 22:26-29, it says, be not one who shakes hands for surety. And we talked about this. That is, again, he's talking about having something taken from you that is of great use because you put it up for surety. Okay. So in other words, don't let your interaction with others, or your agreements with others, be something that you put up for surety that is not just basically your own labor force. So that usury, I know we've talked about this before. I wanted to go a little bit more into detail. But moving on back to the rest of our study. And remember the judges, when Laban had suggested that Moses employ certain men to help judge. And one of the requirements Yahweh says is that they not be men of covetousness or gain, or that they not desire filthy lucre. And so why is that? Because then they could be bought off, or they could be compromised because of their love for money. They could be bought off, hey, here's, some money if you side for me. And then it would destroy the justice system, which is why we have the trouble that we have today in our world. And when you even see very impoverished countries, I assure you it's because of a corrupt judicial system. It's a corrupt law-giving system where money is more than likely the very attribute that is corrupting those men in those high places. Okay, so we see then that Laban is exacting this type of usury, or this burden, upon his own son-in-law. And why is Yah allowing this example to be revealed in this particular chapter, or this experience of Jacob's life? Because later on, Jacob is going to become the patriarch of Israel, of the 12 tribes. And so this is an experience that Jacob actually has to go through. It's something that he has to know with his own being. Can somebody tell me, why do you think Yah allowed Jacob to go through this experience with his uncle? He's going to pass something on to his children, one way or the other. And why do you think Yah is undoing, or what do you think he's doing here? Who wants to talk about that?
Okay, you actually, you said one or two things to me. I mean, you actually did give me some important tips with respect to the financial aspect of what I'm trying to embark on. But again, I just wanted to try to correct one or two things. You said I should pray about it. I'm not married. I'm single, please. Okay, and I will look into it. I'll pray about it, and I believe. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'll pray about it personally, and then I still have people I can actually talk about it with, whom I believe will contribute one or two opinions. Yeah. I'm not married. I'm not. Really. Yeah. For now, yeah. Okay. But all the same, my own part of the contribution is the financial system of this world is not really is actually fashioned after the Babylonian system. The Babylonian system, the financial system of this world, starting from the World Bank, the bankers themselves, they actually exploit people. They actually do that, and I think in every aspect of our life, we are being affected indirectly. I don't know. Down here, we don't pay much of it. We pay tax, but indirect tax. We don't pay directly. Down this area, we don't pay direct tax, but we do pay tax. And I cannot say that it is the same for you guys, because our tax system here is not too it's not too, should I say, too exorbitant. It's not that much. We pay tax, but not in everything we do. The only system, the only problem we have down here is we have a bad government in Africa. Africa has very bad government system. When we have leaders who are corrupt, and then they are very, very selfish. Selfish leaders who only think of themselves. So that's just the major problem that we face down here in Africa as compared to other parts of the world. But I think individually, it's all about individual mindsets. It's all about we working on our own self personally, because we can't change the system. The system has been there. It's meant to be this way. Satanic in nature. So it's definitely going to continue this way. But we as individuals, we can work on ourselves, try to better ourselves and try to, consider how we interact with our fellow individuals with respect to financial issues as well. And then also how we implement that in our lives. I think that's just my bit of contribution there. Thank you.
Absolutely. I love that, brother. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Karim.
With regards to your question about why did Yah allow this to happen to Jacob? He's going to be the father of many nations, right? Like, just like Abraham was the father of many nations, it goes right on down the line. This is a learning experience. Like, going back to when he was younger, he already did certain things that were kind of deceptive, kind of not really, but definitely deceptive. And this was kind of a teaching moment, like, hey, you did that things that were deceptive, and while they were Yahweh's, plan, they were not nice. And now he's allowing Jacob to go through this experience so that he can teach his seed after him, so that he can teach the generations after him that this is what happened to me, and this is not right, and this is not who we are. We are called to be set apart. That's one of the reasons why Jacob wrestled with Yahweh. Like, he wrestled with him, and his, this, we'll see this later.
Hallelujah. You're on to something, sis. You got it. All right, let's hear what Jessica's got to say. Thank you for that. Hi, Jess.
Hey guys, how are you? Long time. So I agree with Karim. I think it's mostly for like the testing of our endurance and being steadfast. Because sometimes we set our eyes on something, and like for instance, Rachel or whatnot. So just because Yah loves us, he'll allow us to go for that thing that we've set our eye on. But it doesn't mean that the road's going to be easy. So I think it's just pretty much like that, a lesson of steadfastness, of trusting in him, and that, trials will be present. And, I can relate a lot with this story right now in my life, because I have a lot going on. I have worked for the same boss for the last almost 3 years. I mean, I've done like above and beyond anybody would for like a rate of pay that is like unheard of, not because I don't have education or because I couldn't find anything, but from my own choice. And so I know that my boss has understood like my loyalty, because she knows it's coming from not a place of like really need, but of choice. And so like I have found myself right now, my husband's in the hospital, and he hasn't been around already for like a month. And I've been dealing with, it's just me, myself, and my 3 kids. And my lease was up. I needed to find a place with one income, my low income. So, it's all a long journey. But my boss ends up like wanting to buy me a place that I can rent out for her, and also like helping me or like co-signing for me. So like I have found favor in what, throughout all of this journey. And, like I've chose to stick with my husband for a while with a lot of issues that usually people wouldn't. So again, just a journey of steadfastness, of trusting in Yahuwah. He gets us, he sees us through anything really that we will set our eyes upon, but we'll have our learning journey throughout the way.
So that's, I don't know how, if you were able to hear what we had said earlier, but that's exactly right. When Yah was showing me that about Jacob, you actually came to my mind, Jess, about again, how you have been a blessing, not only to your boss, but to me and to so many others because of the way that you conduct yourself in very difficult situations. I've seen it. I've seen your fruit, right? It's not just your words that people would, people can use words to, try to convince us of something, but your actions have lined up. And, I think Yah is going to take very good care of you because of that. But thank you for sharing that, sister. And I agree with you. And let's see, I think Christina had her hand up. Let's see what Christina has to say, and then I'll bring it all together. Go for it, sis.
Okay, so here's what's hitting me is, I think a big clue is in verse 13, when Yahuwah makes the point of saying, I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a memorial stone. Here's the big one, the big clue for me, where you made a vow to me. Now arise, leave this land, and return to the land of your birth. So I think he's teaching Jacob a very important lesson, and it has to do with everything that everybody else just mentioned. That the honoring of his word, how important that is. So he's teaching him the immense importance of honoring his word with his actions, and that in order to understand that fully, he has to be on the other side of it. So he was on the other side of having experienced someone not honoring their word for 20 years.
Whoa, Christina, that's good.
Yeah, I think the emphasis on 20 years being, expressed several times in verse 41 connects to that. Also, and this is something that I was in preparation for today, I just read through these chapters earlier this morning, and something really struck me that connects to what I'm saying. And we're not there yet, but it's in chapter 32, and it has to do with his namesake as he becomes Israel. So when I did a word search on Israel, the name itself, if you can pull up the KJV, with the Strongs.
Yep. What chapter?
So this is chapter 32, verse 28.
Okay.
When he gets his name. In my NASB, the translation is, then he said, your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have contended with Yahuwah and with men and have prevailed. But I was like, you have contended. So I looked up in the KJV, it's different. What does it say there? It's blocked.
As a prince you have power.
Yes. So if you
I've never noticed that.
Right. And I had never either. But I was like, okay, what is this H280? This is about to blow your mind. Right.
Lord, government,
yes,
ruler, noble
woman, government, noble woman,
a noble woman. Whoa.
Go to the Strongs and wait till you see the name.
Stop
Sarah.
it. Stop it. Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow.
So it literally means, and if you go back to the ancient, to the pictograph, at the top, it says, literally, you'll see it over and over. The pictograph is a picture of a thorn representing the turning. The hand is a picture of a head. So combine these mean turn the head, the turning of the head to another direction. One who rules turns the people to his direction. The turning of the head of the child or a student in particular direction. It keeps talking about that turning of the head. So I was like, okay, so this word here, which means turning one's head in the direction of righteousness, in the direction of right ruling, that's what it means. It's leadership, it's responsibility, it's walk by example. So Jacob had to go through those 20 years in order to earn, literally be primed and ready to then have the final struggle, the physical struggle with the physical manifestation, the anthropomorphic manifestation of God in flesh, that man struggled with him all night. And then he got in that, it culminated with him receiving the name.
Wow.
Now he was ready. And look how he handled his brother immediately afterward. He became a servant to him. He bowed, he humbled himself, which is what Yeshua does. So it's like, to me, it was a lesson in teaching him, this is what it means to be Israel. This is what it means to be a light to the nations, to be a light to the world, to let your light shine.
Same, Megan. Megan said she got chills. Girl, I just looked at my arms. I'm like, are you for real? I got chills, sister. Oh my goodness. Let's just unpack that for a second. All right. So let me just
Sarah.
The name Sarah.
Right.
Let me bring it all
I like your
together
answer better.
because I really liked what OK had to say. Let's start from there, since OK brought up the conversation about the way that we conduct ourselves, right? Brother Ezechi said initially, this economic system that we live in, this Babylonian economic system, is wicked. We cannot, this not something that we should pursue because it is created to keep people oppressed and under a burden of servitude. It's forced labor. So he also said the best that we can do in a corrupt system is conduct ourselves accordingly and allow the Father to bestow favor upon us, like Joseph, like Jacob, and like Jessica was saying, in any given situation where the way that we conduct ourselves, it's the way that we serve them that should show that individual that they are blessed in our company. They are blessed by us. We should also take heart in knowing that even if we are exploited in a given situation, and this is going to lead me to my next point here about status, okay? So even if we are exploited in a situation, just like in Jacob's case, we see that Yahweh made sure that Jacob was still compensated, even though he may have been exploited by a wicked person or for whatever the reason was. Yahweh eventually made sure that Jacob not only received what was due to him, but even more than what was due to him. We see the same thing with with Joseph, right? He's compensated. We see this also many times as Yah with Abraham. He was compensated. We see this with Isaac. He was compensated. So Yah compensates us, which is why, again, we should not have a spirit of vindication where we would then want to go and vindicate ourselves. With that being said, absolutely brilliant what Christina brought up. Now let's see if we can look at this and add a little bit more as well, bring it all together. So I agree with Christina here. The reason I believe that Jacob had to go through that was because, again, there were many lessons, as you all brought up, many different lessons there. And one of the lessons I believe also was that Jacob himself, originally his name meant usurper, usury. A usurper, right? To usurp. And so this character or this nature of him had to be wrestled with, it had to be subdued, and that was done by putting himself in a situation where whatever you recognize something. When his brother, I'm going to ask you all, when Esau came to Jacob famished, what did Jacob do? Was that brotherly love? What he did, was that for the benefit of his brother, or was that usury? Remember, we talked about ultimately what is the nature of usury, that covetousness, desiring something and getting it in a way that is manipulative or deceptive. Because remember, the heart of usury is that you exploit somebody's weakness.
Right.
And
yeah, probably so.
Love is that you cover that weakness. Love is where you recognize that you have a resource somebody else requires, and that you give them that resource to bring them back up to status.
I was gonna say the same thing you said. So when his brother came to him famished, just like you said, instead of feeding him like a noble person would do, he exploited his hungry, his famished against
Right.
him. You know, he used it against him.
Right.
And like you said, he usurped his weakness.
He did. Absolutely. So he had it in him. So he enacted this type of usury. He took advantage and exploited his brother's weakness. So later we see that his kin folk also exploited his weakness. And so I agree. So beautiful thing in regard to repentance too. So let's consider that. So the fact that Jacob had to go through what he went through, he also experienced the true consequence of usury, the weight or the burden of his brother. You notice, as we're going to keep reading on real quick, you notice that when he returns to his brother, like Christina said, also brother, okay, he submitted himself. He was able to yield. He didn't go back with a haughty spirit ready for contention. He didn't go back to fight for his right to rule. He went back and he subjugated himself. He came back with a humbled heart, and he asked Yah to go before him. He recognized, notice, I think he had a heavy heart for what he had done to his brother, knowing that it was error. It's the same pattern with the children of Israel and Joseph. Again, it took some time, and in the midst of their famine, when they were in need of mercy, lest they die, they received mercy, and their hearts were then humbled, and they were able to truly repent. I tell you the truth, repentance, the heart of repentance is such that Yah deals with us in a way that it leads to reparation. Remember, equity and justice. Justice means dealing with the crime in hopes that you will never commit it again, and then to be an example to others so that they would never want to commit that crime. And then equity is that you make restitution, or that you pay back whatever was lost. And sometimes that means a relationship is repaired. Okay, that's restitution. Equity, sometimes a relationship can't be repaired. There are circumstances that will forbid that. But ultimately, that's the heart of justice, okay? Is that, an eye for an eye, lex talionis, okay? All right, let's move on. Let's see. So yes, Jacob had to go through some of that. Okay, so now here we are. But again, the idea, you note that in verse 31, 31 verse 1, he says that he had lost favor in the sight of Laban and his household. So he no longer saw himself blessed. You notice this is important. Am I not sharing my screen? I'm sorry. So this is important because remember, it's all about perspective, right? So initially, Laban had perceived his that he was blessed as long as Jacob was in his presence. And so this is why he was taking advantage. He really didn't have a true sense of reverence for Yahweh. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't. But Yah allows it because, again, there's a greater lesson here. True repentance should lead us to a right, should alter the posture of our heart so that, again, it restores us. How many know that sin in our lives, first and foremost, and ultimately destroys the relationship between us and our Creator, right? It breaks down the relationship through, and the communication, as Sister Christina mentioned early on, that when she was younger and she had gone through the situation, she had felt somewhat neglected, and because her prayers are being answered, so she chose to neglect her relationship with the Father. And so, but she said she would never do that again because she did not find the benefit in it. So now she can encourage people to keep going, to endure, and not to give up. So we see the beauty of, even in our own time, seasons of testing and need for refinement, that we can actually eventually turn what the word Yah says, what the enemy intended for evil, he can turn around for good. And so I do want to focus really quick on something else here. You notice that, again, some of the terminology here, again, as we are more comfortable with these terms, but people who are new may not be so much, but I hope that you see it. I want to show you something in regard to that financial system. So remember, Brother OK had mentioned the economic system or the Babylonian financial system. So if we were to look at the very thing that Yahusha overturns in the temple because they were exchanging money, and I'll give you another verse here. It's perfect. It says 1 Corinthians 10:21, you cannot drink the cup of Yahuwah and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of Yahuwah's economy and the economy of devils. I assure you that's the case here. So it's the word here, trapeza. It's actually where we get the word for, trapeze, but also the a trapeze. And so it says here, a table or stool as being four-legged, usually for food or a meal, but also a counter for money. That is a broker's office for loans at interest. This word trapeza is also used in the Greek for the word bank, a banking system. So it says right here, the table or stand of a money changer where he sits, exchanging different kinds of money for a fee, an agio, and paying back with interest loans or deposits. Does this not perfectly align with what we are talking about right here? So so it says here, specifically the table of a money changer, that is a broker's bench or a counter at which he sat in the market or public place. In general, the outer court of the temple. A changer of money, a coin dealer, hence generally a broker's office or bank where money is deposited and loaned out. The word is used with this meaning in Greek also in Acts 6:2, metonymically for serving. So banker, money changer. Here it is, write it down. G5133, trapezites or trapezitas. Here, a money broker or banker. Okay, so now we see something different. When he was overturning their tables, he was overturning their banking system, their economic system, right? In which they did business amongst one another, because again, it was unlawful to enact usury, to lend at an interest with interest. Wow. So again, understanding these fundamental principles that we're learning here are absolutely necessary in understanding the words of Yahusha and even his passion in which he came to liberate the children as well as us. We're going to continue and we're going to finish up our reading, and then we're going to get into the legal terms here, and then we can conclude for the night, okay? So who would like to read the next portion of Genesis? It is Genesis 31, and we are at 26. We're going to read from 27 up to 52. Yes, Maggie, thank you. Go ahead.
I'll be reading from the Berean Study Bible. All right. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You have deceived me and carried off my daughters like captives of war. Why did you run away secretly and deceive me without even telling me? I would have sent you away with joy and singing, with tambourines and harps. Or you did not even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. Now you have a foolish thing. I have power to do you great harm. But last night, the Elohim of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you no longer, because you long for your father's house. But why have you stolen my gods? I was afraid, Jacob answered, for I thought you would take your daughters away by force from me by force. If you find your gods with anyone here, he shall not live in the presence of our relatives. See for yourself if anything is yours, and take it back. For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the idols. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, then Leah's tent, then the tents of the two maidservants, but he found nothing. Then he left Leah's tent and enters into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken Laban's household idols and put them in the saddlebag of her camel, and was sitting on them. And Laban searched everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Sir, do not be angry that I cannot stand up before you, for I'm having my period." So Laban searched but could not find the household items. Then Jacob became incensed and challenged Laban. "What is my crime?" he said. "For what sin of mine have you so hotly pursued me? You have searched all my goods. Have you found anything that belongs to you? Put it here before my brothers and yours, that they may judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and your goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flock. I did not bring anything torn by wild beasts to you. I bore the loss myself, and you demanded payment from me for what was stolen day or by night. As it was, the heat consumed me by day and the frost by night, and sleep fled from my eyes. Thus for 20 years I have served in your household, for 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the Elohim of my father, the Elohim of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, surely by now you would have sent me away empty-handed. But Elohim has seen my affliction and the toil of my hands, and last night he rendered judgment." But Laban answered Jacob, "These daughters are my daughters, these sons are my sons, these flocks are my flocks. Everything you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or the children they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between you and me." So Jacob picked up a stone and set it up as a pillar. And he said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took some stones and made a mound, and there by the mound they ate. Laban called it Jegar Sehadutha, and Jacob called it Gilead. Then Laban declared, "This mound is a witness between you and me this day." Therefore the place was called Gilead. It was called Mitzvah because Laban said, "May Yahuwah keep watch between you and me when we are absent from each other. If you mistreat my daughters or take other relatives, although no one is with us, remember that Elohim is a witness between you and me." Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is the mound and here is the pillar I have set up between you and me. This mound is a witness and this pillar is a witness that I will not go past this mound to harm you, and you will not go past this mound and pillar to harm me. May the Elohim of Abraham and the Elohim of Necho and the Elohim of their father judge between us." So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and invited his relatives to eat a meal. And after they had eaten, they spent the night on the mountain. Early the next morning, Laban got up and kissed his grandchildren and daughters and blessed them. Then he left to return home.
Excellent, sister. Is there anything that stood out to you that you want to bring up or discuss?
Honestly, no.
So much, right?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's look
um,
at this for a second. Thank you very much for that time. So several things are going on here. And again, this is obviously a court case in which, again, a crime was committed, and Yahuwah meted out justice by compensating. Remember, the idea is that justice and equity are enacted for the sake of repairing or restoring. And we see that God is very present here in the midst of all of this, because at the end of the day, the relationship is somewhat restored through a covenant bond. We see that even though it was hard labor and a difficult time for Jacob, it was really an opportunity for Jacob to mature. It was preparing him to be able to return to his homeland, to do so with a right assessment of himself as a servant, even though he would return subjugated to his brother, but he was really in a seat of honor, like we saw with what Christina brought up as nobility. Right? Because that word Sarah, the root of that word is Sar, like Sar Shalom. It means a prince or a ruler. So that's why Jacob, the wrestling of Jacob, is really speaking to Yah Sharel, meaning one who rules with Yah, or to rule with him. And that really does confirm what I have been saying all along, that A, we are royalty, B, we are of noble descent because of Yahusha, praise Yah. And as a result, we need to learn how to conduct ourselves accordingly. Finally, with that being said, there are responsibilities, there are obligations, expectations, and responsibilities that are placed upon our shoulders. The more you know, right? The more you know, the more responsible you become. But this is part of the maturing process. So as Yah allows Jacob to go through this life experience, there are it's a lot for him to learn. But more than anything, what he's going to learn is how to be a vassal to Yahweh, how to follow, how to let Yah go before him. He's going to learn that. And that status alone is what gives him the honor of a king. And so then he will be able to then pass on that legacy to his children. It is something in the spiritual realm that's being passed on. This is why, again, even Yahusha, so think about it. Sin is a deficit. It is a debt, brothers and sisters. Sin is a debt that cannot be repaid. It's something because it's a life for a life, and you cannot put your life up for collateral because it's not yours to give. It's a gift, even as the land was given as a gift, so your life was given as a gift, and you are not the owner of it. This is why Paul assures us that our life is not our own. Even now, it has been purchased for a great price. So even though we become co-regent, we become masters of the house, we truly cannot render authority over our own selves unless we have the Ruach to assist us. Otherwise, the flesh, being as unruly as it is, will constantly rise up against the soul and strive to usurp it. So notice a few things here in this particular chapter and verse. Notice a few things here. So important to note again that Jacob is venting his concerns, his complaints. And, Laban is also, because again, he's part of a foreign nation. You know that because when he makes the covenant in the name of several gods. He says, in the God of Abraham, but also in the God of Nahor and the God of their father. So, and Jacob, he says, look, I'm just going to swear by the God of my father, Isaac, by Yahweh. So he sort of like, skips over that, he gets away with that. But you notice again, he calls upon all the names of the gods. He's like, by all the gods, just to be sure that this covenant is kept. Also, something to note here is the boundary stones. Notice again that he puts this heap, but also the pillar. Yes, Karim, go ahead, sister.
That I always found it strange that the verse says the rocks cry out in silence. And I never understood that. But if we're talking about these rocks, these heaps, these pillars, these boundary stones being a witness to a covenant, and that covenant is being destroyed or is being broken, then of course the rock would cry out.
Oh my goodness, Karim. So let me ask you all something. That was powerful. So could it be that when Yahusha says, Hosanna, Hosanna, and they're trying to silence the people, he says, look, if you shut them up, then the rocks will cry out and testify of me. So these, how many stones were, even Abraham, remember Abraham went all over in his pilgrimage and he laid stones as a witness, or he laid stones or pillars all over the place, right? Abraham did, Isaac did, Jacob did. So you have to wonder, these stones were acting as a witness to whatever occurred there, as the individual sometimes gave a thank offering or sometimes gave a burnt offering, whatever it was. So, or just simply acknowledging that Yahweh's presence was there, as Jacob did with the stones. And then in this case, it was testifying to a covenant. So these stones then are acting as witnesses. So do you think perhaps that this is what Yahusha is talking about when he says, look, even the rocks will cry out. If you were to stop the people from crying out, then the rocks would cry out. So it says right here, but some of the Pharisees of the crowd said to him, teacher, rebuke your disciples, because they were like, loud. He says, I tell you, he answered, if they remain silent, The very stones will cry out. Wow. That is amazing. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that, sister. I appreciate that. All right, so let's see something here. So let's look at this word again for the pillar. And again, it's going to act as a witness. So it's acting as a boundary sign, a boundary stone. And remember, we talked about boundary stones in the past. And you notice that he says specifically here, well, there was a few things. You notice first and foremost, he charges Jacob with not marrying any other women. That was interesting. Then here, he says, I love this. He says, this heap be a witness, and this pillar be a witness that I will not cross over, right? Hebrew or Eber. I will not cross over this heap to you, and that you will not cross over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. In other words, we will not violate the boundaries that have been established up until this point and no more. Okay. So he's saying that we will respect these boundaries. So God placed a boundary between them. That was beautiful, so that he could be assured of his safety. All right. Let's move on. Let's read through 32. Who wants to read 32 all the way up to 21? And then we'll finish up with that one, and we'll finish up to 33, and then see how much time we have. We have an hour for those who have the endurance. Who would like to read Genesis 32?
And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and manservants, and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace. And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also come to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds, and the camels into 2 bands, and said, if Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with thy staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. And he lodged there the same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, and 10 fowls. And he delivered them into the hand of the servants. Every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space between drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee and asketh thee, saying, whoso art thou, and whither goest thou, and whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It's a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, I can't see it, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when you find him. And say ye moreover, behold thy servant Jacob, is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with a present that goeth before, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company.
All right, so let me bring this to your attention. So in Genesis 32:18, so we basically get the vision that obviously Esau's return, I mean, Jacob's returning, and he has a reverence, he has a fear because he knows that when he left last, his brother sought to kill him. Well, 20 years have passed, and you would think that he would say, well, hopefully his anger has been pacified, but just in case. And you notice that Jacob is not willing to simply bribe his brother, but he notes here, or it's noted here, that Jacob has interceded and asked for Yahweh's help. He has asked for his help. He says here, I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown unto your servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become as two bands. I really want you to take note again of his heart and the great maturity there. And so, like we were talking about early on, that as we mature in this walk, we're learning to subdue our flesh. I like what Christina had said again earlier. And we look back, we reflect, and we take note of those reference points. We say, okay, I remember when I was in the situation, you did not leave me, you did not forsake me. And so we have to sometimes stir ourselves up. And that's how we can grow or mature. And that's what we see here with Jacob. He's recognizing his worth. He's also recognizing that it's Yahweh that gives him esteem and value. But I think the most important word here is that he recognizes that he has experienced God's mercies and of all the truth which you have shown unto me, he says. Wow, I love it. So he really, 20 years, it was not without Yahweh that he existed. On this word present, even though it's not the word for tribute, which I'll give to you in just a second, but it is an aspect of tribute. So let's look at this word here. It's minka. And so later on in the Torah, when it comes to the tribute offerings or the tributary offerings of the feast or the appointed times, we note that if it is a minka, it's a gift. Just like we saw earlier with debt, specifically tax or interest that's placed on debt, what it does is it becomes a burden that is passed on even to the offspring or the seed. Well, this is also the same with sin. Sin is a deficit. It is a debt. And that's what I was saying when Karim had brought up her point. But so sin is a deficit. Sin is a debt that cannot be paid off on your own because you have no collateral. When you're born into the world, you're born with nothing. You're born at a negative. You're born already impoverished or indigent, and you have nothing to give as collateral. So the enemy, part of the deception of this world, is that you are a free-born agent, that the illusion of deception is the illusion of freedom, that you have you have to build your way to the top. You have to attain social status by wealth and power, and that's how the world runs. But this is not the case with Yahweh. And because sin is a debt, it is the type of debt, again, that cannot be, it's insurmountable burden. You can pass that on to your children. And that's how sin is inherited. It's the same thing. It has to be relieved. Somebody very wealthy, somebody as like a benefactor, very wealthy benefactor, has to come in and pay off your debt in order to release you or to set you free. And so note here this word for present. So he's sending Esau a tribute. Write it down. Tribute. Very important. Again, as we get into the feast, we'll find how important it is. You'll see here that it says here, to a portion, that is to bestow as a donation, euphemistically, a tribute, specifically some sort of offering, usually bloodless and voluntary. That's what's important here. Most often, minkas or gifts or tribute offerings had to come at the behest of the giver, from the goodwill of the individual. And this is why I mentioned last week about donations or offerings that I receive from whomever. And I always want the person to know that what you're doing is you're giving a thank offering. That's how I receive it. It's a thank offering, and I appreciate it. It's the right way for us to maintain this reciprocal relationship. Even though, as I mentioned to Brother Okay, what I do not because of money, or because of people, their approval. That's gonna get old real quick, right? You can only so much. But the idea is that that's a wonderful way for us to contribute to the labor of someone else, right? Say thank you, I appreciate that. And again, we see that there can bring harmony in that. What's also important to note here, I want you to see something. It's a gift that comes from the heart of the offerer. The word is used to signify a gift, as in the peace offerings that Jacob offered to Esau. So I want you to write that down too. These are a tribute, paying tribute to him because it is coming from his heart. It is not a form of usury or manipulation. We see that again, his posture or his heart has changed as a result of what he went through. Again, putting him in a right place to lead. Now, it says, secondly, it signifies a tribute. An example of the use of this word is in Judges 3:15, where Ehud was sent from Israel to Moab on the pretense of bringing a tribute. Perhaps the most frequent use of this word is to denote a grain offering, in which grain offerings were brought on pans, that is suggesting cakes, and mixed with oil and other substances. Now, I talked about this in last week's presentation, where it was never brought in its raw form, but it was usually brought, you usually would turn it into something useful or something beneficial for the recipient, okay? So now I want you to look up this word here, or at least write it down. So 4522. So it says here, and he saw that the rest was good in the land, that it was pleasant, and bowed his shoulder to bear, and became a servant unto tribute. So, in other words, to thank him for whatever it was. This is going to be Issachar, the blessing upon Issachar. But I want you to look at this word for tribute, and it's here. It obviously speaks of labor or serfdom, and this is going to go into our statuses in just a second, but I want you to write both of these down. So it says a body of forced laborers, that is task workers. I don't like the word gang, but whatever. Forced labor. So remember, we were talking about corvies and how the foreign nations would place corvies on the people without any benefit. They would not get paid for it, and they were forced to this type of labor. Okay. It says here, properly a burden, as causing one to faint, Michelle. That is a tax in the form of forced labor, a levy. Okay. A taskmaster that's placed over. So I just want you to write that down, and we're going to look at the difference between this type of forced tribute. It's a tribute that's made to the king, but it's forced upon the person. And then the type of tribute that comes from, as it's called, a free will offering. Now I'm going to bring that up for discussion and ask you, why do you think Yahweh's free will or his tribute is different than the tributary offerings of the nations? What is the difference here, and why? Mic is open. And well, before we do that, let me give you a definition from the Google. So if you look here, tribute here, it says an act or statement or gift that is intended to show gratitude, respect, or admiration. Or, like in the labor force, a payment made periodically by one state or ruler to another, especially as a sign of dependence. Okay. So one, what do you think the difference is between Yah's requirement for tribute versus the requirement of foreign nations or leaders, kings?
One is voluntary, the other one's forced.
Thank you, friend. Thank you, Lewis. One is voluntary and one is forced. And why do you think that's important? What do you think the ultimate outcome would be for both?
I think it's because you give begrudgingly, right?
Yeah, and what do you think that's going to do eventually to the givers? What do you think that will lead to if you're forced to do something?
A
Like if
bitter
you
heart.
force your
Resentment.
children to obey constantly when they're 18, what do you think happens?
They get resentful.
Yeah, and what kind of behavior does that lead to?
Rebellious behavior.
Rebellious. That's right, Lucito. Rebellion, uprising, rebellion, right? And then now let's think about free will offerings. When you give from your own generosity, what do you think that leads to?
Gratefulness.
Yeah, that's it.
Joy.
Right? Joy. And you want to do it more often. And how about faithfulness? How about when you teach your children to do what's right because it's in them, because of the benefits of doing what's right, because it's who they are, because you love them and all the good things that come along with a healthy, nurturing relationship? Do you think your children are going to want to hurt you and rebel against you and disregard you as a parent? Or do you think they're going to want to do their best, not to please you, but do their best to sort of honor the system that you put in place? You think your children are going to be rebellious children or honorable? More than likely, honorable, loyal children. Loyal, right? Because you gave them the freedom to make mistakes, to learn, to grow, to develop. And so they honor you. And so the idea of a tribute, remember, we just read it right now. The idea of a tribute is to honor somebody, is to honor something, is to pay homage to. So when Jacob is sending his gifts or his presents, his tribute to Esau, he's sending it to him to honor him. And it's coming from his heart. And Yah knows. And Yah is then able to bring that honor by restoring the relationship. Again, this is part of the underlying current of right ruling. Go ahead, Christina.
Wow, this really ties something together that I witnessed this week. These two systems at work. So this past Friday, we attended it's my first ever formal Shabbat dinner. And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced. It's a wonderful man and his wife, and they barely speak English. So their children, who are like 9 and 13, translate for them. And the father, as part of the dinner, he brought his children around, and one of his other guests also had a young child. And the fathers blessed their sons, and then he blessed his daughter. And the children are some of the most well-adjusted children I've ever seen, and they're confident, and they speak up, and they're respectful. And just seeing him place his hand on his son as part of this dinner, and then speaking to him in Spanish and blessing him, and the child with his head down, and it was so incredibly beautiful. And I was just telling my husband about it on the way home, just how it relates to what we're talking about in the study, and blessing your children, and all these things, and how I was so blown away from it. And then a couple of days ago, I find out that I have relatives in Tennessee, and my uncle had passed, and there's a lot of strife in that family because my cousin, who has a lot of challenges in her life, we'll just put it that way. Her father, from the moment she was born, never believed that she was his. And so she grew up under that understanding, living under the scorn of her father. And so he passed, and his two children are not attending his funeral. and he passed by alone. There was no one with him. And it was just such a stark contrast of exactly what you're talking about. And you see what an opportunity it is to be a parent, and to what you have been given. It's such a gift. We don't have children. My husband and I, we tried, but we just didn't happen for us. And I was so moved and taken by what an incredible blessing and opportunity and gift it truly is from Yah to be able to raise a child up, and just what you have delineated these two differences, just between free will offering and forced labor, is quite something. So I just wanted to share that because it was at work this week.
Wow.
What I witnessed.
I love it. I love it. I love your examples, ladies, gentlemen. Thank you very much for participating. I'm utterly blessed when you do. I just want you to know that I'm utterly blessed when you do. Who can tell me what it means? I've asked several women this week, and they gave me immediate textbooks. Answers were just perfect. What do you think it is to nurture? What does it mean to you? Anybody, ladies, gentlemen, to nurture. What does it mean to be a nurturer? What is the point of nurturing? Like, what is nurture?
Like to lead up in the way that they should go.
I love it. Yeah, Lewis, go ahead.
To raise up.
To raise up. All right, let's keep going. Let's give some more verbs there. Go ahead, Maggie.
I think of it as like giving nutrients so that they can grow properly.
Okay. All right. I love it. Go ahead, Christina.
Just to be present, to be involved, to be interested.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Everybody's correct. Yes. So the textbook answer is to cultivate growth. A nurturer is somebody that desires to see someone else grow. And is that, again, not the heart of the Father, wherein why he gave us the Torah or the law? So to cultivate or to nurture that growth so that we are raised up properly, so that we don't grow crooked, so that our backs are not bent. How many know the difference between a master and a slave in posture? In posture, a slave would have a bent back. They were always laboring in the field, okay? And a master is somebody that's a head above. A master is somebody who's an overseer. That's actually what overseer means. It means that you can oversee the laborers, right? You're standing up. You don't bend your back. And I'm giving you a visual here. So a master would be somebody that, doesn't bend the back. Well, in the cotton fields here in America, when they brought over the slaves, they would have to put their taskmasters on horses because the cottons, they would grow fairly, high. So they weren't necessarily bent over as they would be with wheat. So they would be plucking, but they would still be pretty high. So in order for the taskmaster to be able to see above all the others, they would have to put them on a horse or elevate them. So that's what it means to get off your high horse, get off your high horse. And so that's where we get this concept of these terms of status, high and low. But this also relates to that concept of crookedness, right? So when he says, I've come to make your crooked ways straight, I've come to bring you out of a status of bent over, serving because of the burden that's placed on you by sin, and to bring you into a place of free will, that you serve out of the gratitude or the generosity of your heart, so that you'll become burdensome. It doesn't become a bitter endeavor, that you recognize that I have made you rich so that you can bring others into a status of wealth. So again, you love your neighbor as yourself. If you are rich in kindness or compassion or whatever it is, again, it's not money always. Again, I explained to you how last time, the women in my life, I had never known compassion. Never, not even from the judicial system. I had never known. And if I had experienced compassion, it was so rare that I didn't know how to recognize it. Who could say that? And then when I got saved, the Father immediately put me around women who had a very nurturing spirit, and they nurtured me, some of them with compassion, some of them with meekness, mercy, whatever it was that I needed to grow right before him, to develop character. And so we see that this is what Jacob has developed as he has gone through his difficulties, his hardship. He develops that character, and now he's ready. I love it. Okay, let's move on. Who wants to read? Yes, please. Amanda, will you read the second part? Corvée is something that was placed on. I'll show you, Jessica. You said I lost you at corvée. Let me show you what a corvée. Again, it's just an implemented tax by way of labor. So it's a French word. It is a form of unpaid forced labor that is intermittent in nature, lasting for limited periods of time, typically only a certain number of days' work each year. Statute labor is a corvée imposed by a state for the purposes of public works. As such, it represents a form of levy or taxation. Why? Well, these keep coming up. You notice that? They keep coming up. They keep coming up. You see some examples here. Very interesting to note are some examples of what that would have probably looked like in Mesopotamia or in Babylon. You see here, this is signifying that forced labor. Again, you see here in Babylonian corvée, because it was very common in Babylonia and in the ancient Near East. Resentful, very resentful, right? It is not some, they did not offer their time and their energy to beautify the city, but it was forced upon them. And that says a lot about the fidelity or the love that they had for their king or for their nation. And so again, this is beautiful. We see in contrast that Yahweh does include a tributary offering. And again, I want you to get familiar with these words. Okay, who wants to read 32, 22 through 32? Amanda, if you will.
And Jacob went on his way, and the messengers of Elohim met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp of Elohim." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother in the land of Seir, in the field of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Say this to my master Esau, your servant Jacob said this, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed there until now. And I have bulls and donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants. And I have sent to inform my master to find favor in your eyes." So the messengers returned, and Jacob, saying, "We came to your brother Esau, and he is also coming to meet you, and 400 men with him." And Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. So he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two groups. And he said, "If Esau comes to the one group and strikes it, then the other group which is left shall escape." And Jacob said, "O Elohim, the father of my father Abraham, and Elohim of my father Yitzhak, Yahweh, who said to me, 'Return to your land and to your relatives, and I do good to you.' I do not deserve the least of all the loving commitment and all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I passed over this Yarden with my staff, and now I have become two groups. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and shall strike me and the mother with the children. For you said, I shall certainly do good to you, and shall make your seed as the sand of the sea, which are too numerous to count." And he spent the night there, and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 suckling camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, and 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. He gave into the hand of his servants every drove by itself, and said to his servants, "Pass over before me, and put some distance between drove and drove." And he commanded the first one, saying, "When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying,
To whom do you belong, and to where are you going? And whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my master Esau, and see, he is also behind us. So he commanded the second and the third and all who followed the droves, saying, Speak to Esau this same word when you find him. And you shall say, Also look, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, Let me appease him with the present that goes before me, and after that see his face, he might accept me. And the present passed over before him, but he himself spent the night in the camp. And he rose up that night and took his 2 wives and his 2 female servants and his 11 sons and passed over the ford of Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the stream and sent over what he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him that night until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he did not overcome him, he touched the socket of his hip. And the socket of Jacob's hip was dislocated as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I am not letting you go until you have blessed me. So he asked him, What is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Your name is no longer called Jacob, but Yashrael, because you have striven with Elohim and with men and have overcome. And Jacob asked him, saying, Please let me know your name. And he said, Why do you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen Elohim face to face, and my life is preserved. And the sun rose up on him, and he passed over Penuel, and he limped on his hip. That is why the children of Yashrael to this day do not eat the sinew of the hip, which is on the socket of the thigh, because he touched the socket of the thigh of Jacob in the sinew of the hip.
Thank you very much, sister. Is there anything in these verses that you would like to discuss or any questions that you have?
The only thing that really stood out to me was when he was separated into 2 droves, and the thing that sort of flashed in my mind was Yashrael being divided into 2, and that one day Yahweh will bring them back as one.
Excellent. So when I had presented the last presentation and I showed the 2 divisions or the camps, that was the purpose why I did that, to show that there was, remember the prophecy was that there are 2 nations in your belly. And even though it pertained to Jacob and Esau being at odds with one another, we see this theme running constantly throughout the entire words of our covenant. So from the beginning to the end, we see that there is constantly 2 at war with each other, right? So there is a constant division. So that wrestling between brother and brother also exists between Esau and Jacob, and then later with the northern and the southern tribes, but also with the flesh and the spirit, right?
Hallelujah.
All right, go ahead. Thank you very much for reading, sister. Go ahead, Karim.
One last thing that I
Sure.
noticed was the name
Mhm.
Niel.
Mhm.
The way that she pronounced it, it sounded so much like pineal, like the pineal
The
gland.
pineal gland, yeah.
And I'm just sitting here like, whoa, because he saw Yahweh, and the pineal gland is what is most often correlated with like those spiritual
Third eye.
visions, and
Yeah.
yes,
So it does make sense. That's probably where they got the word, right? They probably took it from this pineal and then named it the pineal gland, right? So interesting to note that this word pineal, peniel, is from the word panim, which means face, but also from the letter pe, which is mouth. So it's interesting because, again, taking away from the whole, pineal gland, what we get here is panim el panim. That's what's actually being said here. He calls the place pani el, panim el, the face of God. He says, for I have seen Yahweh face to face. So this is panim here, panim, which means face, from where we get the concept of to pan, when you have a camera and you pan to the left or to the right to pan something. So that's where we get that term. So the face that turns. And remember, earlier, Christina brought up that a leader, Karim, you can lower your hand, sis, that a leader is someone who has the ability to turn the head. So we have panim, and then this word here, el, panim, panim, el panim. And so this is what it means, to face God, panu el, pani el, okay, to face him. And remember earlier, or many times I had suggested that the Torah, or right ruling, is basically living Coram Deo. It means to live in his face, to live in his presence, to live before him. But I like what he says here for those who say that no one has ever seen God and lived, but yet he says here, I have seen Yahweh and lived. I love that. He says, I have wrestled with him, I have seen him, and yet he has preserved my life.
Yeah, just going back to that, to
Yeah.
what Sister Christina said. When you turn the heads, was it Japheth in Judges 11 when they kicked him out, said, "You have no inheritance with us." I think in verse 8 it says, they turned to him and they made him the head. And so I think that's like,
Ah.
yeah. So they turned to him and said, "We'll make you our head." I'm like, oh, that's very,
Um,
you know. So there's this gentleman who was kicked out because his mother was a harlot, and they said, "You have
mm,
no inheritance. You have no right to rule. You have nothing." But now we're turning to you because you have an
mm.
ability to save us with your, your
Wow.
warrior-like ways or whatever. They turn to you, and we're gonna make you our head. But I think it's also very encouraging and very enriching when you start looking at it that way. When you're turning to someone, our Father turns to us. Like in what, and you, it's like everything you've been saying, face to face, speaking and face. That means when you speak to someone, you're giving them the honor to look at them and give them time. Like he's
Mm.
honoring us, he's giving us nobility. All this is very beautiful when you look at it this way.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So I love it.
Hallelujah. I love the words that you're choosing to use, brother. Absolutely. It is gorgeous. It really is gorgeous. When you think about that, yeah, I never thought about the attention that he gives to us. Like, it has always been vital to me to know that he sees me. And I know that there have been times where I've ministered to another woman who was, experiencing her own shame or destitution. And that I don't know why, but not everybody, but there are times where Yah would just put it on my heart to let them know that Yah sees them. And I think it's so important to know that, he has turned his face towards us. Even the psalmist and even David, King David, many times when he cried out to the Father, asked that he not turn his face away from him. In other words, to keep his eyes on him. We see this even with the analogy of him perceiving the welfare of a sparrow. His eye is upon the sparrow. How much more does he care for us? All these things. And it really does say a lot about the attention and that nurturing that he gives to us, right? And yeah, to bring us upright, to bring us into a noble status of honor, to bring us from that bent over shame, slavery of rebellion, that corvée or that tax for labor that has been placed on us, that we were doing so begrudgingly, bitterly, and now bringing us into a place where we get to sit at a table with honorable people, like with the honor of a king, and sit at his table with the king and eat with him and share with him and delight with him. And we don't have shame. We don't have the guilt and the shame that would weigh us down in his presence, but we get to enjoy his company. And, I never thought about that. And that just,
Yeah, even in Deuteronomy 13, where it says it's the death penalty to try to turn anyone away from your, it's like if anyone does any kind of magic trick or whatever,
yeah.
but they do it to turn you away from me. You're like, get them out of here, stone them, gone, because I want your focus to be on me. Give me the honor I'm due, but I'll give you the honor you're due. And it's just,
Hallelujah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It was considered a capital offense. Anybody, and that's why again, I think Yahusha, when he deals with the Sanhedrin or the council of the Pharisees, he is it's to that degree of heat, because he recognizes that they have in fact exploited their nobility or their position, and they have turned the children away from the Father. Yeah, and guided them. Would you like to read, brother, the final chapter?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And not in Japanese. Okay, go ahead.
And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked and beheld. Esau came. Where am I reading to, ma'am?
Yes, all of 33. It's a short
Okay.
chapter. Yeah.
Esau came, and with him 400 men, and he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the two handmaids. And he put the handmaids and the children foremost, and Leah and her children after, and Rachel and Joseph hindermost. And he passed over before them, and bowed himself to the ground 7 times, until he came near his brother. And Esau ran to meet him, and embraced him, and fell on his neck, and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted up his eyes, and saw the woman and the children, and said, Who are those with you? And he said, The children which God has graciously given thy servant. Then the handmaidens came near, and they and their children, and they bowed themselves. And Leah came near, and Leah also with her children came near, and bowed themselves. And after came Joseph near, and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And he said, What meanest thou by all this drove which I met? And he said, Those are to find grace in thy sight of my Lord. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep that thou hast unto thyself. And Jacob said, Nay, I pray thee, if now I have found grace in thy sight, then receiveth my present at my hand, and therefore I have seen thy face. For therefore I have seen thy face, as though I have seen the face of God, and now it was pleased with me. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. And he urged him, and he took it. And he said, Let us take our journey, and let us go, and I will go before thee. And he said unto them, My Lord knoweth that the children are tender, and the flocks and the herd are with young with me, and if men should overdrive them one day, all the flock will die. Let my Lord, I pray thee, pass over before his servants, and I will lead on softly, according to the cattle that goes before me, and the children be able to endure, until I come unto my Lord unto Seir. And Esau said, Let me now leave with some of them folk that are with me. And he said, What needeth it? Let me find grace in thy sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day unto his way unto Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built him an house, and made booths for his cattle. Therefore the name of the place is called Succoth. And Jacob came to Shalom, a city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, where he came from Padanaram, and pitched his tent before the city. And he bought a parcel of the field where he had spread his tent, and at the hand of the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. And he erected there an altar, and called it El Elohel Israel.
Fling on it, huh? The little Latin. Ele, hello, hele, hele. El Elohi.
Just that very quick, that how humble he was to bow himself. And was he really buttering up Esau just to call him like the face of, to say, I seen the face of God when I see your face?
Where is that? Show me. And King Joseph everybody trumped that and said, What mean to say other troubles?
Verse 10.
Just I pray thee now, if I have found grace in your sight, then receive my present at my hand, for therefore I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God, and that was pleased with me. What do you guys think? Do you think that he's acknowledging the fact that I haven't seen you for, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me see what you all think. That's a great question. Go ahead, Karim, and then Christina. And then Lewis, you can keep your mic open.
I think that he was just trying to tell his brother that he was incredibly when you've seen the face of Yah, like there's no greater presence or experience or joy that one could truly feel, I think, than to be in that presence and to see his face. And I think that he was comparing it to that, saying like, I am so happy to see you face to face after all these years, and that you're pleased to see me and not angry. I mean, after you feel like you've done someone wrong for so long, and you feel in very many ways indebted to that person, when you finally go to meet them again and there is no there's no bad energy there. There's no need for accounting for those things because it's already been forgiven. How
Or even
how much?
fear, huh, sister? Like the fear is
Yeah,
kind of,
like
yeah.
that
Oh,
exactly, like that fear that he felt when he realized that his brother was pleased to see him. All that fear is dispelled, and all that's left is just sheer joy. Like, I am so glad that you're my brother. Like, that you're truly my brother. Not that you're mad at me, not that, no, just you're my brother, and I haven't seen you in forever. That's what I understood by it.
I think so too. I think there's just like a really human. I mean, again, I'm sure that I have to look into this. I haven't. Great question, Lewis. But I'm thinking there's not probably, of course, there has to be something even more deeper. But I also see it just from that human perspective that perhaps it's just a real human experience he's having here. But also too, like Sister Karim said, that probably that the fear that he had is no longer present. Perhaps he has a greater confidence. Let's hear what Christina has to say, and then you can take it back. Okay, Lewis?
Yeah, I think yeah, right along with what Karim is saying, I think it's a miracle that not only was Esau, I, if I'm trying to look at this through Jacob's eyes and imagining, he's expecting his brother may want to kill him. He has justification for it, and he's afraid. Uh, Hence all the sending forth of the gift and wanting to make things right with a sincere heart and all of that. But in verse 4, Esau runs to meet him. It's not just, I'm not going to kill you. We're cool. It's okay. Whatever. Forget about it. Right. But Esau runs to meet him, embraced him, and fell on his neck and kissed him. And they wept. So it was like there's this complete miracle happening. And to me, it's like to be forgiven to that degree and to be restored and received with such love is a miracle of God. And I think that's how it strikes me, is that Jacob's looking at the situation going, this is the work of the Father in you, in you. That is literally a miracle of God. So when he's looking at his brother, he's seeing a reflection of the Father, because it's the Father's hand, I think, upon Esau and his heart, that's causing this restoration.
And then you notice that word too, Christina, right above Brother Lewis. Can you pull it up just or put it verse 8? Can you go to verse 8 real fast? Because he's asking, like, what is all this, right? And Jacob's like, well, this is to find grace in your sight, right? To find grace, show me grace, not mercy, but grace, that you would extend that grace to me, right? And Esau, and then what does he say? And then Esau says, I have enough. Look at I think his response is what melts his heart. And again, this just makes me think of like equity and justice, and always the Father's heart is for repairing, right? Relationships. He has to move upon the heart. Really quick, sister. I've had discussions, Brother Lewis, I've had discussions with some women that are estranged from their husbands, and perhaps their desire, they really love their husbands, but their husbands' hearts have become so cold or hardened towards them that even their response is, oh, I just want a divorce. I can't stand that man anymore. He's so cruel and all the things that he does, whatever the case is. And in my heart of hearts, I'm like, oh, but you're just respond. I know I could hear it in them. They still love him, the husband. And I'm like, you're just responding, you're hardening your heart now, and you're just responding the same. So true restoration is something that I think only God can do, right? Like he's the one that softens the heart of the offender and the offendee. That's what I see here. Don't you see that? Like that real restoration gives us hope,
Yeah.
gives me hope.
And I think it's interesting too, we're not told what's been really going on with Esau, but we know, like you said, that justice, that equity, we know that he has 400 men with him, and he says, I have plenty, I have enough. We don't know the story there. We don't know what the Father has been doing with with Esau. I mean, the promise of the seed would go through, and the covenant, as we talked about originally, would be passed through Jacob's line. But the love of God for his people, his creation, you know, we don't know what he's been doing in Esau's life that also contributed to this moment where he's prepared. You know, we know that Jacob's been prepared for this reunion. The work that the father has done with him for the 20 years, and you know, all of that. We don't know what father has been up to, the specifics in Esau's, but we can see the fruit. And I
Hallelujah.
think that's interesting.
Well, check this out, Lewis, and sisters. Check out what Maggie says. Job 33:26. Wonderful find. Says here, and I guess this is Job. Job prays to Yahweh and finds favor. He sees Yah's face and shouts for joy, and Yah restores his righteousness to that man. Woo! If I could whistle, I would
Right
go,
on.
I would go. Go ahead, Karim. His word is so attractive, is it not? You know, I get it now. If Yahusha is the word, you know, he had, it wasn't his physical form. It wasn't his physical form. It's just so attractive. Is it not so attractive? That's why I like what Lewis said. What did you say, Lewis?
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous. Yes, he said it's gorgeous. You're absolutely right. His word is gorgeous. It's stunning. It's attractive. It's just like, oh. Okay, go ahead, Karim.
So, while we were looking at this, I went through Bible Hub, the interlinear, to see what exactly it says. And I think, unfortunately, even though these are beautiful thoughts on why it does that, I think it was a mild mistranslation, because the word that was used isn't Yahweh, it's Elohim, and we have learned throughout studies that Elohim could, it could mean Yahweh, or it could mean, someone who is in a higher status,
A
such as a
master
Lord.
leader, right?
And then we see earlier in the verses of this chapter that he is humbling himself, and that he does refer to Esau as, a Lord,
He
and
does.
putting
The
him.
word there in 13, sister, just to bring it up for you, is Adon. So he does. He calls him an Adonai and Adon. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not entirely convinced that it was so much as, like seeing the face of God physically, so much as it is, putting, just further reiterating that he is humbling himself to his brother's presence and to his brother's status.
So I think also Esau is responding to Jacob's posture. You know, there's a lot to these chapters, which I will go over next week, but absolutely correct. I think that Esau recognizes Jacob's honoring him. And that is what puts Esau in a position where he no longer wants to subjugate him under his rule, like, put him to death, like put fear upon him. But he rather recognizes that he has come to him in mercy, or in his weakness. It's now Jacob who is coming back in a place of like, give me some lentils. You know what I'm saying? And look at how beautiful, like when Yah humbles us, when he brings us low like a servant, right? When the world puts a weight on us like shame or guilt, that'll break our spirit, right? It breaks our spirit. It shames us, it dishonors us, and it makes us bend our head in shame. It's a yoke around the neck. But when Yahuwah humbles us, you notice that he says, those who have been brought low, I shall lift up in honor. So you see the difference when Yah humbles us, even though he's correcting and disciplining us, and it's hard, but it teaches us, and it really does bring us to a status of nobility or honor. And I think that's just very important to note, the difference between godly sorrow, and that leads to repentance and changed behavior and a changed heart posture, and then worldly sorrow that leads to condemnation and utter destruction. But
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I was driving when you were talking about the offerings, the free will offering and the rebellion when you're forced, and it just reminded me of well, kind of my own self, but the way we're to love Yah. We're to love him freely, and he's given us that choice to love him that way, because when we're forced to love him, we just turn rebellious against him. So I just wanted to share that. Kind of reminded me of my younger days.
absolutely. I agree with you. Yes. You know the difference between being chosen and a concubine, right? I think this was like Rachel, what Corinne was mentioning earlier. I think this was Rachel's concern, right? So we don't have time tonight, but that was kind of what I wanted to get into about legal status. And I'll just conclude with this then by saying that a legal status is important. It was very important then in the ancient Near East. Maintaining a status meant that that status, whatever that status afforded you, it afforded usually those rights. You had access, you had privilege, whatever it was within that status. So the more statuses that you acquired, the more privilege you had, the more access you had, the more opportunity you had. Okay. And so, for example, ladies and gentlemen, a husband and a wife, although they are titles, but they are titles of a status. I'll give you an example here in America. If you were to do your taxes, I think we talked about this in the past, you would have to choose a status: married, single, head of household. These are statuses that you maintain, that basically the IRS only cares if you have the status of married, because that means that you have access to one another's resources and therefore are taxed accordingly. Okay. And that's why they say if you're single, no one else can claim you as head of household. In other words, no one else can claim your resources and be taxed thereof. But what's important here is this status or this title. So when you're a foreigner, and I brought this up before, but we'll go over it again really quick. When you are a foreigner, or when you're a stranger or a sojourner in a land that is not yours, again, we talked about how you can be vulnerable because you don't have any tribal affiliations or alliances. Nobody knows you. They don't know your character. They don't know if you're a shady person. They don't know who you are. So nobody's going to really come to your defense immediately should there be a squabble or some sort of conflict that breaks out, right? So a brother who has a brother is not going to go against his brother for a stranger. Again, if they don't know you, it's not going to be, very common for them to break out against one another for a stranger. So you have some vulnerabilities. What I want us, and again, we're going to start looking at the spiritual aspects of these things, but what I really want us to understand is how this pertains to our status in the in the kingdom of darkness. When we were agents, once children, I want to show you something, okay? But you, brethren, are not in the darkness, so that this day should overtake you like a thief. For you are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not sleep as others do, but let us remain awake and sober. Let's look at another one. Acts 26:18 says that so the mandate that has been given to us is to go and open the eyes, to open the eyes of those who sit in darkness, so that they may turn away from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to Elohim, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and an inheritance among those sanctified by faith in me. So this is the one that I was actually looking for. It says, I will rescue you from your own people and from the Gentiles. I am sending you to them to open their eyes. Okay. And I love this because it says that they might receive forgiveness of sins and then receive an inheritance among those sanctified by faith in me. Okay. Even Isaiah prophesies of the eyes of the blind being opened and the ears of the deaf being unstopped. It says here to open the eyes of the blind, to bring prisoners out of the dungeon and those sitting in darkness out from the prison house. Okay. So when I talk about status of citizenship or legal status as a citizen, you were once a stranger in the house of darkness. You did not have any legal status. Truly, you don't belong there. But you dwelt in the house of darkness or the kingdom of darkness. You dwelt there. Okay. This is why most of us were we didn't get away. We suffered much, even though we were rebellious, like the black sheep. But the point is that we didn't have any rights. And so we were treated and disregarded in certain ways, shamefully. The enemy knows how to, even among his own, even amongst the prisoners, he knows how to elevate them and use them as puppets, influencers over others, right? So just because, there was many of us who prospered in darkness, many of us who became the queen of darkness or the king of darkness or the king of sorrow or the queen of sorrow. And we prospered in that world, for a period of time, because again, the enemy knows how to perpetrate and to create images and influencers and, his puppets. But as a foreigner, legally speaking, as a foreigner, we really didn't have any rights, which is why the flesh can never find its way out. We will never, ever, 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 mankind will never find relief from darkness because they have no legal status. The flesh cannot contend against the forces of darkness because it has no legal rights. See, the enemy does know. That's why we're going to have massive victory here one day, because the enemy knows these things. He knows these legal terms. He hates me. He hates you, and he hates me. He hates us, brothers and sisters, Sarah's and Jacob's. He hates us. He does not want us to understand these legal terms. He doesn't want us to understand dominion, legal jurisdictions, our citizen rights, because when it's time, we will begin to walk in and execute right ruling, judgment. We will begin to say to sickness and disease in our body, go. We will speak a word and it will flee, because we will have that kind of authority, that kind of dominion. And, again, I'm believing it. So he doesn't want us to know that we have a status outside of slavery, and that we are slaves to our flesh, slaves to sin, slaves to this world. But yet again, YHUH has given us freedom. And part of that freedom is a status as citizens in the kingdom of heaven. You see, he now takes you out of a place where you were genuinely a foreigner. Why do you think Abraham says, I am just a sojourner in this place? He's not talking about the realm of heaven or the kingdom of light that exists here. He's talking about the realm of darkness. Even King David says, I don't dwell in the land of the dead, but but in the land of the living. See, he understood that there were two realms here, a realm of darkness and a realm of light. Being a child of darkness producing after its kind, or a child of light producing after its kind through right ruling. You're either a master or a slave. Your citizenship or your status is either as a master or a slave. And part of the true transition of salvation is that you've been delivered from eternal bondage. You have been delivered from the corvée of death that has been imposed upon us because of rebellion. And then you have now found relief in the house of liberty, but you still have to learn how to be a master. You have to learn first how to self-control, govern your own house, so that you can now help others build theirs, thus becoming stones of righteousness, building one another up. Does this make sense, ladies and gentlemen? All right, go for it, Christina.
So I came across something today. I've been still vetting it, but it's right along with what you're talking about. And I want to present it to you to get your thoughts. Okay, we have the promise of salvation. Yes. We are heirs of the kingdom. Yes. To rule.
Bring it home,
YHUH.
girl. Yes.
Okay. So today I discovered that in the first century, what a how a last will and testament was put together and presented. It was a scroll with 7 seals. Are you familiar with this? Right? Is this too soon? Is this too soon?
Wow. Go share it, sister.
So, okay, because I mean, I've been combing the internet, like looking and trying to, and so apparently like Gaius referred to it in Rome. Okay, but it's all in Latin. I don't read Latin. So I can share the screen. It's a short article that I found, but I mean, this study that we're doing is so important. When I read this, okay. Okay, it's on this man's website, Randolph Richards. I've never heard of him, but okay, a scroll with 7 seals. He says, I was invited to contribute an article for Popular Christian magazine. He says, if, okay, in a heavenly vision, we are told, then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. John says, I wept and wept. And the Greek word used there is like to weep profusely, like wailing, because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. And that always struck me. It's like, why would he cry so hard over that? Like, what's going on? It says, why would a scroll have 7 seals? If I just wrinkle my brow and ponder why an ancient scroll might have 7 seals, or I could wrongly conclude 7 seals meant sealed really well. Or maybe I might spiritualize it and say that maybe 7 seals meant spiritually sealed. Rather than just pondering, I should research it. Recently, he says I did that. Someone hearing this story in the 1st century would have thought 7 seals, oh, it was a will. In the Roman Empire, wills, as in a last will and testament, were officially registered and filed at the government office. This was too expensive and official for most folks. There was another method, and he references Gaius 2.147. A person invited the heir, the executor, and usually 5 witnesses to attend. He dictated his will to a secretary. When the document was finished, it was rolled up. Each person attested that it was correct and official by wrapping a string around it, tying it, putting a drop of wax on his knot, and then pressing his seal into the wax. Thus, the will would have 7 seals. When it was time to make the inheritance official, the heir and the executor had to be there, and a majority of the witnesses. A papyrus from AD 325 actually describes the opening of a will. The executor says to the secretary, in the presence of whom did you make out the will? The notary answers, the signatories. The executor asks, how many signatories are there? The notary answers, 7 and 4 are present. The executor says, let the 4 subscribe that they have recognized their own seals. After the signatories present had subscribed that they recognized their own seals, the will was open and read. Now we understand their background rather than reading hours into the text. Revelation 5 is about the opening of a will. We are told that even rolled up, you could see the book was written on both sides, indicating that the entire document was full of text. It's a will with a lot of stuff in it. The setting in the Revelation is a heavenly throne scene. The will is the will and testament of the Father. John weeps because none of the 7 were there to open the will. Then the Lamb steps forward. He opens all 7. That was the part we were supposed to notice. He is the heir and the executor of the will. And I will add in, he reads it because he is the word of God. More than that, he is all 5 witnesses. The will of the Father was written before anyone else was around, since there had been no one else to witness it. We see in visionary form what the scriptures also tell us. The Father's plan was made before creation, and the Son will inherit everything. That is why he says, in this life, you will face tribulation, but take heart because I have overcome the world. The period of time we're stepping into, this great tribulation, for us, we're coming into our inheritance, and he is going to operate through his people, and he is gathering us. Yes. Woo!
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Wow.
And
Man,
we're being prepared.
we are,
And
sister.
like Jacob, you gotta 20 years, sometimes 20 years, you know,
Tell me about it.
heartache, heavy sun, frosted night, all of that.
Okay.
Woo!
Okay. So we are going to remain focused and diligent. And that was an excellent find. And when we get into the laws of inheritance, oh my goodness, that's probably going to blow things out of the water.
Very exciting. I literally just came across it today, and I was just like, what?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we think about sin being passed on to, and how we inherit the lies of our forefathers and so forth, and how those lies again can become even as the creditors that demand a payment, right? That demand payment, the lies of our forefathers. So this is why, again, it's the truth that sets you free. If you think about the lies acting as creditors who come now and they demand payment from your children and your children's children, well, then that's part of the taskmasters assigned to levy a debt. But then the truth comes and sets us free from those lies. So we're no longer required to pay that debt. That's why, again, we talked about this in the past. This is why we have to die to our former selves. So we have to die and leave that house. We have to die and leave that house so that we're no longer under the obligation of service. And now we become free will angels. We get to choose. We get to choose to serve our master and our king.